Hi, everybody at the Elephant and Castle community. Joining us today is Kashif Boothe, but also Mel is going to be joining us. Kashif, thank you so much for being part of this today. I really am looking forward to this chat because you and I have already had a little meeting, so I'm excited about what's to come. But meet Melissa, the other half of Retribe.
Well, good to meet you officially. I've heard a lot about you, Melissa, so it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks to be in a space with you.
Yes.
Kashif, so for the people at the community, can you give everyone an introduction to yourself and what you do?
Okay, well, I'm a freelance producer within film, TV, and commercials and social media content. Have my own production company where I produce web series and short films, feature films, kind of done a range of spectrum of things for the last 6 years or so. And yeah, that's me like in a nutshell.
It's a short nutshell.
Yeah, sorry, I like to summarize it very quick. I don't want to go on for too long.
Yeah, no, you're from London originally. Can you tell people where you grew up?
Yeah, born and raised in London with Jamaican roots. My family came over here during the Windrush generation in the late 50s, early 60s. And yeah, so yeah, South London based always.
Kashif, how did you get into what you're doing now? I know I'm not going to disclose your age to anybody, but you've been doing this for a little bit of time, but you are, fairly, you are a younger person compared to me. But how did you get all involved in moving image?
Well, I'd say I wanted to study media and get into media from like about 13. So I remember doing research and like wondering, okay, how can I get into film and TV? And I saw you could study media. So I did that at college. I did a BTEC media course, and a lot of people who do BTEC media courses get a lot of flack, but they're actually really great to do because it was very intense. I did a lot of practical filmmaking and TV studies, music production, editing, PR, journalism, just at college when I was 16 to 18 years old. Then once I got my A-levels, I went to university and did a film degree. And after that, I started working in film and TV by doing a lot of unpaid work experience at like Big Brother, at loads of production companies like Jamie Oliver, or studios across London. And so that helped me gain a lot of experience. And then, yeah, after that, I was able to get a job because of the contacts that I'd made. And so I started to work my way up in the industry in festival and factual entertainment. So that was working on talk shows, food shows, shows with like low-level celebrities, I'd say. and then I just kind of moved on and started freelancing across that and moved into scripted and worked at like ITV Studios, worked on a period drama called Mr. Selfridge. It was around the time Downton Abbey was really huge with one of the guys, Jeremy Piven from yeah. And so just kind of started to freelance and do that. But then I got really not bored, but the job I did at ITV Studios was very toxic and I didn't really understand why I wanted to do this anymore. It just felt like a job. So I started to make random projects just with my little DSLR Canon camera. And yeah, the projects were terrible, but it helped me reignite my passion for film. And so that's what led to me launching my production company in 2016. And so I haven't really looked back since. So yeah.
I'm on mute. Sorry, I said beautiful.
Thank you.
Nick, your silence, is that because you want me to ask a question or reflect something back?
Yeah, I saw you nodding a lot, so I don't want to like just ask all the questions.
Yeah.
Although I have a lot ready to go. So
well, I'll just ask one just because I'm always curious about this, but you did say there was a toxic environment. You almost felt like maybe a little bored or not fully aligned with what was happening. So as you continue to grow and develop and create your own kind of stories, pieces, expressions, what is about that brings you joy? Like what is it about it, that this art that connects you with yourself or with people?
I think it's also about just sharing stories or telling stories that people can relate to, or when you've come up with a concept, an idea, and people get it. They've laughed at the joke, or they've been looked at something and said, oh, wow, I really understand what that character was going through. That's what I really like to do, but also creating content where people can relate to it through a factual element. So if I'm telling or creating concepts or stories where people can understand what I'm saying in terms of if it's about race or sexuality or whatever. I think that's really the best feeling. And especially when you've done an end product, it's always amazing because yeah, you go through hell trying to get something done. And so once it's done, it's like, yeah. Amazing. So yeah.
So it's like this beauty in like expressing, educating, connecting, like all of these pieces. So can I ask, what's your creative process like? Is it a nightmare in your brain? That because it's a nightmare in my brain, but so I'm assuming what is like a day when you're in your flow look like for you? Do you have a routine? Is there rituals you do? What's your creative process like?
It can be a nightmare in my head, definitely. I'm constantly coming up with ideas. I walk around with ideas in my head or write stuff down on my phone. I think the creative process for me is a bit different because I used to write and then I stopped writing through lack of confidence and just not really thinking I was good, even though I had a lot of success with the stuff I'd written. I think sometimes when you're working with people who aren't supportive or really are very toxic, that completely put me off. So I got started to write recently. And so I just kind of pulled a brief of what I wrote about maybe 4 years ago. And so that reignited my passion. And I remember the writer Shonda Rhimes saying that she has a hum when she gets into her writing flow. And so I kind of can get into a flow and I won't stop. And that's where my passion is kind of flows and all my ideas come out. So yeah.
That flow space is like the magic, isn't it?
Yeah. 100%. And it just doesn't stop. It just goes until it's done.
It almost feels like it comes from the inside out, doesn't it? Where you're not trying so much, you're just in it and everything feels like it's all working for that moment.
Yeah, 100%. Because when if it feels forced, I just feel like I'm not getting the best out of me. So I'd rather write or create in that space where I'm just it flowing very naturally.
Cool. Nick, I took over. Go on.
No, it's good. I love the way that, you know, when I'm thinking about, because Kashif, we come from very similar professional backgrounds in terms of I worked with big companies, and then I just had this need to start my own company. And I don't know if it was so much about creativity. It was more around the idea of, because creativity it's a hard thing to kind of define. A lot of people, you know, when you were working for the big companies and, you know, doing that wallpaper TV, which is just, let's make some pretty pictures and some nice little edits, you know, a music bed, and we'll make some Zed celebrities look funny-ish or something. Then it is just wallpaper. There's no real meaning or narrative to it. You know, MTV type stuff. And I think it's this thing of like people really, it's hard for unless you really know like that where that little seed, that little light, that idea comes from, and all of the work that goes into, you know, like I was looking at some of your Nate and Jamie stuff, you know, that it looks great, but there's a narrative to it, there's a story to it, there's something, but people just watch it and they go, oh, this is cool. Yeah. But the work and the layers and the complexity from the original idea, the storyboarding, as you say, the writing, it's not just a question of, you know, making some nice animations. There's just so much depth to it. And how do you try to explain that to people? You know, again, I love what Melissa was doing about your creative process of coming from this idea to getting to, you know, actually being able to put it out there to people to show it. You know, what is the journey? I know you're talking about your creative process, but what's the journey? What's the proactive journey of how long it takes from the initial idea to getting it shown?
Well, with my series, Nate and Jamie, when I came up with that, I was very strategic about it because I'm a producer. So I think of logistically, how can I get something made, done within no budget, basically. So when I wrote that show many years ago, I made sure to write it in a way that I could film it in one day, or I'd be able to cut corners and shoot it in one location and make it look like it's multiple different locations. And so that's the kind of strategy I went into it, and making sure that it would be at least maybe 5 to 6 minutes. I think the longest episode is only 11 minutes. And so because it's short form content and for online, I wanted to make sure that we get to the punchline quickly, and then people can laugh, move on to the next episode and binge it in like half an hour, because they're not really long episodes. So that's how I kind of looked at it. So I made sure that I got crew or a team where they understood my vision and where I wanted to go with it and how we wanted to shoot it. So because we didn't have a good budget at that time, I'd make it that we could shoot in about 4 or 5 hours. And so I have free camera set up, make it very multicam, like a sitcom format, change, okay, we're in a coffee shop, this scene, but then over there we're at a bar, but we're all in the same place and nobody can tell the difference. And so that's how I kind of moved with it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I think that, again, it's hard for people to kind of come up with all of the work that goes into, preparing to try to get something made. But I'm interested to know from, your days of like just your own self shooting on the DSLR. Now that's actually saying that you are fairly young, because I'm from the mini DV. I was talking about it the other day, like we were mini DV tapes and you're actually moved into digital. But what was that like for you, just to be able to have the freedom to move out of the traditional sets of TV production to all of a sudden becoming more free with, a man and a camera?
It was very freeing because I was able to come up on the spot, new ideas, play around with what I wanted to do. I wasn't confined to working to somebody else's vision or having to work with people I don't really like, and get to work with people who look like me as well. That's also a great space. And when you're self-shooting or working with people on a lower level, quote unquote, you're able to be on set, mentor other people and teach them how to be able to shoot or lie to set or work with actors and direct. And so that's what was really fulfilling as well. So yeah, you're able to really have a hands-on experience, and you're learning as well. I'm learning how to production manage, I'm learning how to produce, I'm learning how to direct, and further develop my skills and learn how to manage people in a better way. Because sometimes when you're on those bigger shoots, you see people are great at their job but don't know how to manage people, and that's essentially very important if you want to move up within the industry or wherever industry you work in as well.
So beautiful to hear, like there's this like space that you're creating where you're the teacher and also the student at the same time. And I feel like what that requires, like, wouldn't the world be so beautiful and safer and pleasant and peaceful if everybody was just in these roles? Like, I'm a teacher on this level and I'm a student here, and we don't know all the things all the time. Like, it just, when you were speaking, it just like brought a little bit of hope and relief, that we get to, I know in production film, it's a bit different. I mean, all the spaces are a bit different, but it feels like we actually can create the spaces we want to be able to flourish in, to strive in. It might not be easy. It's usually not easy, but it's possible. And I feel like when you're speaking, that's what I keep hearing, is this possibility of us being empowered. Yes. Like that's the word that was coming to mind too, is like when you said to not work with people you don't like, and also people who don't like you not work with you, like that feels like what becomes possible. Yes. When we get to honor our own flow, right? Yes. Because I don't know about you both, but like when I'm not feeling connected to people that I'm like creatively working with or growing with, sometimes I will make it about me not being able to meet them, which I put a lot of pressure on, and like, or them not being able to meet me. And what does that say? Like, there's this blaming game, but it's also like sometimes we need to be with people in this moment that really let us shine. So anyway, that's all I want to say is that kind of pressure we put on ourselves to meet other norms, I guess. So what becomes possible when we create our own space? That's my question and / observation.
No, that's great that you picked up on that. That's something that I do want to do, because I never had the mentor, I never really had guidance in this industry. I kind of just did it myself. And so I refuse to believe that you can't work in a positive environment, because there's times where I've gone on set and I've been the only person and everyone knew each other, and I've just been kind of left alone and not really felt included. And I never want anyone else to feel like that on my production. I refuse to believe that you can't have a positive set or everyone can't have a good time. And so that's something I want to do. I want to, with my content and what I do, I want to inspire somebody or empower other people, because if they win, I win. I just feel like your light doesn't dim just because somebody else is shining. So I've mentored people, if they've surpassed me and doing great things. So if you actually genuinely want to see people win, then you kind of put your ego to the side. And it's a very tough industry, and we all should just be helping each other, essentially.
Yeah, it's not there's enough shame and guilt and blame and comparison, right, going on. And just generally, like, not hate, I don't want to say hate, but maybe ignorance around, and I mean, we've talked about this before, but I think, or not you and I, but in general, I talk about this a lot, but this, like, we tend to live in like this scarcity modality or thinking where it's like, for me to have what I want to have, that means you don't get it.
Yeah.
And I think when we're in that space, especially in an environment like film, where it is competitive, it is kind of like a hustle, a struggle to get seen, to distribute, to everything. It feels though that we're so connected to this idea of like separating each other, like, and it's very capitalistic, isn't it? Where like, I need this, and that just means you don't get it. So to hear you create these spaces where it's like, you win, I win, I win, you win, we're sharing it, feels like we're just adjusting each other's crowns, right? And like, really, that makes me feel, I think I need to hear this today. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Because I just genuinely feel like that, because like everyone's journey is different. So there may be certain aspirations and goals that I want, but if I see somebody else getting it, I'm just like, that's great for you. And then I have to think to myself, okay, what can I do differently? That's how I kind of view it. I don't need to look at somebody else and be, damn, like they don't deserve it. I've been doing this a lot longer than them or whatever. It's like everyone's journey is different, and we literally have to try and figure that out. And that's life. Very, very hard, because we don't know sometimes what our purpose is until whatever age. And I think that's kind of what the next steps are always.
Nick, I'm wondering, like Nick and I, when we were like building Retribe and creating these kind of programs and offerings for folks, is like, we always come back to like, what we're doing is actually not different and unique at all. The idea of building community is like, we would be, I think, doing a disservice to think of if what we're doing is unique. It's not. The idea is not unique. The community, that's where the power is. Nothing's unique in terms of it. But what is our expression of it, is the way we show up, the way I speak, the way Nick holds space. It's those uniqueness. And that's the same, I think, for everybody, for everything, isn't it? Nothing's unique. There's like stories, but it's what we bring to it that creates that magic and connection. When we think about it that way, there is no comparison, is there? It's like, this is how you're expressing your knowledge and your wisdom. Bless you for that. And this is how I'm going to express mine, right? Yeah.
I agree 100%.
I whenever I talk to people who are in film and television, I get to go back to the days where, again, this would have been 25 years ago, where we talk about, and even 25 years ago, everyone's talking about traditional. We would have so many men and women working on this set, and everyone would need a grip and a gaff and lighting and a DOP and an AP and EPs and all these, these traditional settings to create a piece of moving image. And I think about it now, Kashif, and as you're speaking, and I know how you are trying to create spaces for people who look like you, and I think back to those spaces that I was in, and everyone looked like me. And it feels like traditional is built off the backs of a very imbalanced, I'm trying to avoid certain words.
I'm like, that's a very kind word to use, because word that came in my brain was not balanced.
Okay. Racist, power structure, white privilege. And, it was something that, in the time I was not aware of. And now I think about your discomfort in those environments where I have actually, and I don't mind saying this, I've been in a studio recently and there was not one Black or brown bodied person. And this is in 2022. And I was looking around, and I was telling Mel after I came back, I was in shock. I was like, what's going on? It looked exactly like Sky Sports did 30 years ago, where the only Black or brown bodied people were on the pitch. There was, and now you found this need to do something in this day and age, and it's heartbreaking that this still needs to be done and needs to be highlighted, and that voices like yours need to be elevated to show that this need to want to work in these environments, like the big BBCs and ITVs and Channel 4s, are just brought up in us. But when we get there, we're like, nah, this isn't for me. I'm going to go out on my own, and I'm going to be a trailblazer, and I'm going to do what I need to do. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for holding space and just making me more aware the fact that these spaces are built on the backs of not nice things, and that, you know, this kind of unconscious racism or structural racism or systemic racism is so prevalent today that we need to be aware of it so that we can undo it. And in that, I just thanking you, really. I want to go off on it. I want you to kind of maybe pull more into what you're doing and how you're trying to, you know, create platforms where, you know, Black and brown bodied actors and producers and everybody involved in it can flourish.
Well, it's good you brought that up. I'm actually a part of an organization called Black Films Matter. It's created by an amazing filmmaker called Masonda Chola, and she asked me to be chairman. It launched in the summer of 2020, the height of Black Lives Matter during George Floyd's murder. And so it's a charity organization which provides funding for filmmakers to receive, to make their films. So like to make a 20-minute film, you've got a GoFundMe. So we're just literally trying to create more opportunities or create job postings or networking events or workshops and training days, just to show people in the necessary skills that they need to get into certain fields, or just educate them on a vast majority of the roles within film and TV, because everyone just looks at to be a writer or a director. There's, you know, art department, there's locations, there's standby art directors and props, and there's hair and makeup, and there's costume. There's so many different positions, and so it's about educating everybody so that we can show that there's so many roles which you can go after. And so that's one of the organizations that I'm working with. And so we've actually got a networking event on March 10th, so you can actually register on blackfilmsmatter.co.uk. And yeah. And you made a good point where you were saying the other day how you was at a studio and it was still not very diverse. I was at an award show just a couple of weeks ago. Same thing, really, fairly new. All of the judging panel were all white. There was actually, I think, one Asian man, but he wasn't there on the day. And in attendance, it was just, if there was not really a lot of people of color, I was the only Black person, including my friends and the guy who won an award. And there was a handful of films that were nominated for awards and only one, and it was about race. And it was a great film about a contemporary dance film, but that was it. All the other films were about race. It's like, if you're going to have an award show, you've got to make it, it's not like, we don't want to be tokenized. We're just saying that if you have a diverse panel, then you're actually going to get a diverse vote to who sees the potential in a different type of content what's being produced. And that's all we're saying. So that's why we have so many Black and brown award shows which are designated to highlight us, because we're not really still in those spaces. And so that's why when people say those are racist, not really, because we still need to be celebrated for the hard work we're doing. So yeah.
So can I clarify? People say what is racist?
Well, they'll say, like, some people will be upset that there's like a BET Awards, for example. They'll say because it's Black, you know, Black origin, or the MOBO Awards. And so some people might say, oh, that's racist. Like, why do you still have these award shows, you know? And it's like, well, you still need it because there's Black artists and brown artists who aren't celebrated. They're not winning Brits. They're not winning the Grammys. They're not winning the Oscars, you know, so you need loads of award shows to still just give people their flowers. And that's why we still have them in 2022. So
if you actually,
like, to even, oh, sorry, Nick.
No, it was the word tokenized really came through to me. And it's like this thing of like that this is still something that has happened today, is that, you know, when you look at this, and it was one of the questions I've been thinking about, how do I ask this all morning? Because it's been troubling in my head, is that, you know, like this kind of, I know it's so hard to that there are these award shows, and then you're going, is it really diverse, or is there an element of virtue signaling? You know, we're going to nominate so and so because they are Black or brown. And this is still happening today, and again, it hurts me, it's paining me. I'm wondering how do we fix this? You know, that this is still happening with all the Grammys and the Oscars and you know, all of these big award shows that are all still driven primarily by white privilege.
I don't know if there's a fix for it, but I think, as I said, if you have a diverse panel, then yeah, you're actually going to probably get diverse stories or shows, films nominated, and it goes beyond just what the typical narrative is, because it doesn't have to be about trauma or race and stuff. When I know that there's genuinely a diverse panel, is if it's an all Black cast and it's, for example, a sci-fi film, then I would know that it's diverse because that's a diverse story you're telling, and there's diverse characters as well, not just your genuine normal kind of characters what you're used to seeing on TV or in film. That's when I'll see that, okay, you actually are looking for diverse stories and actually are appreciating something which is against the norm. That's why, for example, Get Out did so well, and then Us, so forth. So Jordan Peele's kind of pushing a new wave, a new narrative of just showing us in a different space, which we haven't been seeing before.
It's also like anybody who meets the spaces like that are just focused like a BET or award show specifically, anyone who calls that racist or labels it as something is are overlooking that, I think, in like the structural racism, the structural like ignorance in the systems. It's like, so I feel like that's the part that, you know, it's like, how are we going to move forward if people are just keep labeling something as the other, right? Instead of working from the inside out, people are like, well, everything's wrong with the outside, and like, period, stop, full stop. Where it's like, we're just going to call that racist and other. And then for me, what's so hard, and just like, I think for a lot of people, is that it stops any kind of conversation from happening. It stops any kind of dialogue, any kind of like, why is that racist for you? Or here's why it's not racist, and boom, boom, boom. Here's the history of film and television. Here's the history. So just this labeling of things as different and other just stop any kind of insight. So how do we get diverse like panels if nobody wants to talk about the fact that there's not diversity instead of labeling it, right? And that's all. It's just hard to have these conversations when everyone's so stuck in just categorizing something so simply, right?
I think sometimes it's about breaking it down to their level. I think sometimes if I'm speaking to somebody who's got an ignorance viewpoint, I kind of try to break it down and say, well, if you've grown up in a society where you've just seen yourself on screen in magazines, or every time you turn on TV, you look outside, then you will understand a diversity issue because you're seeing yourself represented. If we're creating platforms just for black and brown people to be celebrated, and then they don't understand why black and brown people need to be in the Grammys and Oscars space, what people fail to realize is that that's still the standard. So if we're not being celebrated in the standard, we're not going to get the money that we deserve, or the platform, or the what to reach a bigger audience. So if we're still just winning awards within our culture, that's great to celebrate our fans, but we're still not going to be appreciated when we go back to a main film or main studio and we're saying, well, we've done all this, but then they're going to be like, well, you haven't won that, so why should I pay you what I'm paying somebody who has the accolade? So hopefully that makes sense, what I just said.
No, it makes a lot of sense. It's actually really like, it just brings the point of like, how are we supposed to, even if it's competition in the film, how are we going to compete on an equal ground if the ground is not equal? Because it's not. So like you saying that and framing it that way makes a lot of sense. Like maybe I'm like overstepping here or making connections where I'm not supposed to or meant to, but it almost feels like, okay, I'm just going to talk about my experience from like creating spaces. So it's like, I create spaces for women who experience trauma. Then there's spaces for men who experience trauma, right? And that's identified as all, right? All are welcome in that kind of like sense of identity. And then there's also coming together with these categories in the space to have a more of an open exchange. But the healing, I'm going to use that word, can't happen all at once together, because we have to work on this kind of healing with what our reactions are. So the spaces separate are important, but they're not the end game. Yes. The end game is to come together with our wounds and with our healing to create different kind of spaces. Does that make sense what I just said?
I think it does, because I think it's also sometimes when you're working within certain spaces or talking about what you want to change, some people want to be the hierarchy. They want to be the ones with white privilege. And But then someone like me, I just want everyone to be on an equal playing field. So nobody's hiding anybody. We're all seen as the same: race, gender, sexuality, whatever. That's what I'm looking for. And so we have our own spaces for that. And then it's about coming together as well. And there's nothing wrong with having those spaces as well, because there's always going to be a point where people can only relate to what they go through within their culture and race at all times. So yeah.
Yeah, like I'm not going to lead a Black man's healing group, because that's not my experience, right? Nor should I expect you or my partner as Black men to go into a space with white men facilitating, because that is not honoring our experience as the way we walk through the world either. So we need to, I think, acknowledge and identify the pain that and the way we're walking around the world, how the world sees us, how our experiences are, and also come together in a dialogue where it's not us teaching, it's not you teaching Nick and me about racism, because that's not fair either, but it's us also using our privilege to say, okay, what's the new structure, right? Or if we're in a position to hire people to do groups, to lead, what does that actual equality, equanimity look like? Anyway, that's just where my mind is been.
No, I agree. It's good points, honestly.
Yeah, I think that it's, as you guys are speaking, it warms my heart to think these spaces are being created for people to come together, to heal, and it's like in these coming together, we become undivided, because it isn't, for me and my experience, it isn't about an individual. It's about the systems that the individual has grown up in. And if we as individuals come together and hold each other accountable to changing the systems, then, and that's because it's the systems that are the division, right? They're the ones that produce the fear, and you guys can't, if Black lives matter, then all lives matter. And then the division happens. And, if you're a white person that says, well, I'm not racist, so all lives matter, then, they're not understanding, the structure and the systems that have made, Black lives matter needed. So with that, let's go into the future of Boothe Entertainment and how you are going to, because I love technology and I love the fact that, we've evolved so much in traditional, shooting stuff on 32 mil, to mini DVs, to the DSLR, to this thing here today. And how is moving image, and what's your kind of future ideas of how you can create beautifully narrative content that can hold space for not just a production team, but for its messages and the kind of stories that you want to tell?
I think, well, because of the internet, that's helped in leaps and bounds, like already. I mean, what, 20 years ago, like you couldn't even do what I've done now, I've luckily been able to produce 4 web series. I never would have been able to do that. I would have had to like do a pilot, try and get some money and then try and get it into festivals and and literally you'd have to send that via DVDs or VHS, and spend loads of money on postage and packaging plus fees to submit to the festival. So I think because of the internet, and then with YouTube, Vimeo and Instagram and TikTok, there's so many platforms now. So many people have done so well nowadays. Like there's a great filmmaker called Ajani Salmon. He did a web series called Dreaming Whilst Black, and that did amazingly well. It went and won like over 30 awards. Now it's been picked up by BBC Three. So it's like, with the digital space we're in, we're able to just continue to push the content we want to see made. And I think because of the talks of Black Lives Matter in 2020, there's still conversations going on about diversity and pushing. So they're having more meetings and stuff. So once my work or some of the stuff I've actually exec produced, like there's a pilot, well, actually a web series now, Talia Versus, which I exec produced, that's done extremely well. And so that's now in the right spaces to potentially get picked up. So it's really the internet and really knowing how to market your brand across all the different mediums. And it's not as hard as people think. Sometimes the way how I do it is I'm not looking for millions of views. It's literally, once I put something on my platforms, on my social media, when you put my name in Google, you see everything I've done. So then you're able to decipher and be able to look at that and say, okay, oh, wow, I like what he's done here. Let's see how I can work with him and so forth. And when you just learn about self-branding, that's fine. I think some people will say that you need to have thousands of followers, and that can work for some people. I don't, but it's still been able to benefit me in the long run.
Well, I agree completely. I think everyone's been clouded with views, like numbers and followers. And what's really hit me lately is that we've got enough followers. Whoever's following us now is enough. It's the impact that you can make with that enough, so that they can start spreading and learning and kind of growing out like that. I was always, and Melissa will back me up on this one. I thought the success of Retribe was when we were going to be producing like all of these mass like pieces of content that hundreds of thousands of people were going to like. And I think you were quite scared with that, right, Mel?
Yeah, I did not like that at all.
Yeah, but something has transformed in me where it's like it's really hit me. We've got enough followers. We've got enough supporters and people who champion what we do. It's about creating content that can spur on individual transformation, you know, so messages that say, hey, you know what, these people are again, Mel says, like, no one's really talking about anything new about, you know, not becoming an individual, but becoming part of a community. And that's what we need to be part of, is a community to help grow and to transform, so that we can make our spaces around us more safe and more inclusive and diverse. Whew. Yeah.
Hard for you to say, Nick? What's happening?
What's that?
You took a big breath. Was that hard
Yeah,
for you to say?
I think that it's just me learning and acknowledging more and more things coming along. Is that I really like the fact that it's about the content, and it's not so much. It's not about the amount of people who see it.
Yeah, it's like when the message is authentic and it comes from a place of your own truth and experience and message that, you know, let it land however it lands, but it's your relationship with the work. When that's done in like authenticity, then actually nothing else matters. Rather, it's the process of the becoming of it, your relationship with the whole thing, I think anyway, where it's like numbers are just numbers and wars are beautiful and but what it is about the recognition of your relationship, I think, with the creation. That is like, you're almost, okay, this is what came to me, is like, can I do everything, create everything as if it were a love letter to the universe? And that's how I'm seeing the creative process. Everything is a love letter to the universe. So if you're working, whether it's in film, writing, dance, and you're just doing it as an expression of love for humanity, for beings everywhere, all this stuff, yeah, you can't do it wrong, really. The pressure doesn't exist because it's your expression of love, I think. That sounded very hippie, didn't it? But that's what I'm.
But there was a little piece of digital art that was put out on Instagram the other day. I think it was from a Joe Rogan's Instagram, and it was a little piece of digital art that it was like a little picture, and then it kept zooming out and it kept zooming out, and and the picture just became, you know, it was just a dot that you were looking at. All these different pictures came through it. And it made me think that, you know, what you're doing, Kashif, is you're creating these things that are being looked at now, that are enabling someone else to create, inspiring someone else to create. And then that's where the beauty comes. It's the ripple effect of your creativity that's going to be influencing generations to come. So I'm interested to know, we've got a few minutes left. What have you got in the pipeline right now? And what's tell us a little bit about your podcast.
So currently I have Talia Verses, which I mentioned. We've got the season finale coming out soon. You mentioned Nate and Jamie before. I've shot the pilot for the second spin-off to that kind of whole franchise, which is currently in post-production. I'm in development of a couple short films, a really good thriller film, a drama film, and I'm producing a feature-length horror film as well. And I've got my podcast, which is my name, the Kashif Boothe podcast, where it's a business and education podcast where I interview creatives or people with across of different industries and mediums, and I talk about their journey, and really hopefully people can be inspired by their journey, and so they are educated, and we just talk about the trials and tribulations of what it's like working in your passion and what can be done next to change, or what they've got coming up next. And it's just about giving a platform to people who I think should get their flowers. So yeah.
Nice. Melissa, do you have anything to add?
No, I maybe I'll ask a question, but
Yeah.
I think you might have answered it 1,000 times. But look, what your hope is for your relationship with creativity, with yourself? What are you hoping to kind of give the world? What is your love letter to the world?
It's so funny. Like I remember I used to wanting to have these goals of like I want to go so far and like get all this and that. And now it's more so as long as I'm able to educate, inform, and inspire my audiences, that's great. I'd love to, sign a deal with a studio so I can get as much money as I want to make every single project. But as long as I've done that, I'm happy. So yeah.
Mm. Did you say you're making a thriller or a horror movie?
Both. So one's a thriller short film and then
Yeah.
one the horror feature film.
So the horror, is
Yeah.
it like gory, like slasher, or is it like suspenseful?
Slasher. So it's could
Nice.
we're hoping that it could be like a franchise. So think Scream, Halloween, Friday the 13th, but British. So that'd
Yeah.
be quite cool. So, yeah, we just
I'm a Friday the 13th like hardcore lover of Jason Voorhees.
yeah, me too. I love slasher films. I love them. So yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of people think that they're just, but there was a skill to it, and you see in these like how they made like there's a series on Netflix that showed the making of like all of the Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and how they were meant to be, and their original titles and everything. It's really interesting, but it's an incredible genre. How do you deal with all the fake blood?
I don't know yet. I'll see. Once we get the money, fingers crossed, to be able to make it, we'll see. I'll just lead that to the art department and graphics.
Okay.
And then
Well, if you need the first person to die to be a 51-year-old white dude, then
well, it is based on the stag weekend. So yeah, so a lot of guys just who are supposed to get married kind of get,
okay.
yeah. So
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll write me in as an old time bartender who like
they don't even make it. See, I'm giving too much away from the plot. The director take
okay.
but basically they don't even make it out. So they don't even make it out. It's while they're getting ready to go out, they just kind of
Wow.
yeah. So
Awesome. Kashif, thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really enjoyed it. Extremely insightful, inspiring. Glad that you're that we've met. Hope to have you in our lives and stuff going forward. So I'm sure that maybe next time we meet is in town for a coffee and Mel can join us and we can have a good face-to-face.
Yeah, that'd be great. Amazing.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody at the What's on Elephant and Castle Facebook community. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to join me on Thursday at 11 a.m. for a Top 3 Tender workshop. We'll see you all later. Thanks again, Kashif. Bye.
Bye.